My name is Jessica Holloway. The day I made my mother hand over the court-ordered deed to the house she tried to steal from me, I didn't smile. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You screamed at my daughter like she was garbage. Now I own this house, get out." Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know who's out there who's ever had to fight for a place to call home. Story start. It happened in a flash, one stupid, slippery jar of jam. We were in the tiny kitchen of my parents' house in northern Ohio, packed tighter than a pressure cooker. I was rinsing dishes when Lily, my 7-year-old, reached for the strawberry jam, her favorite. It slipped right through her small hands and shattered against the linoleum, glass everywhere. Red smears like a crime scene. I turned just in time to see a shard nick her ankle. She winced but didn't cry. She knew better than that in this house. "It's just jam," I yelled, heart thudding in my chest. "She ruined everything again," my father barked, already red in the face. "She always ruins everything," Lily flinched. My mother's voice cut through next, shrill and furious. "You need to teach her some manners, Jessica. She's not a baby anymore." I dropped to my knees, hands shaking, sweeping up the shards with a crumpled dish towel. Lily stood frozen, one sock already soaked with blood. I whispered, "It's okay, baby, mommy's here, I've got you." But I didn't, not really. I was 32 years old, recently divorced, broke, and sharing a childhood bedroom with my daughter in the house I thought I'd left behind for good at 18. This wasn't supposed to be forever. Just until I got on my feet after the accident, the one that totaled my car, cost me my job, and drained what little savings I had left. My parents had agreed to let us stay temporarily. That was 3 months ago. Now, everything Lily touched was a disaster. Every small sound she made was too loud. Every spill, a personal insult, and me, I was treated like an unwanted tenant who forgot to pay rent. That morning had started like any other. Lily had been humming in the kitchen, wearing her mismatched socks and a hair clip she'd made from paper and glitter glue. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was hers. And now here she was, bleeding, shaking, eyes wide and watery, while my mother cursed under her breath about ungrateful freeloaders. I didn't even argue anymore. There wasn't room, not in this house and not in my voice. I just gathered the glass, tied up the trash, and told myself I'd make it up to Lily somehow. Later, maybe when I had a job again or a real place. But something shifted that night. Not in my parents. In me. Because as I wiped up those sticky red streaks from the cabinet, I caught Lily looking at me, not scared but confused. Like she was wondering why her mother said it's okay when it clearly wasn't, and I realized this wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. This was damage. I had to get us out, but I didn't know how, not yet. What I did know was this: they'd gone too far, and I was done being quiet. The house had finally gone quiet. That brittle kind of quiet, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. It was just past 10. My father had gone to bed, slamming the door behind him, and my mother had retreated to her room with the TV turned up loud enough to let us know we weren't welcome. In the dim kitchen light, Lily and I knelt on the cold tile floor, wrapped in an old plaid blanket. She held a damp rag in one hand, her fingers red from scrubbing. I gently guided her hand away from the cabinet. "Let me finish, baby," I said softly, squeezing the sponge over the faint pink stains on the cabinet doors. "You've done enough." Lily didn't argue. She just leaned against me, pressing her small body into my side. Her cheek was warm against my arm. "I didn't mean to drop it," she whispered. "I just wanted to help." "I know you did," I said, brushing a curl behind her ear. "And I'm proud of you. Accidents happen, sweetie. We're still a team." She gave me a watery smile, but didn't say anything else. Her eyes looked heavier than any 7-year-old's should. The jam was gone from the floor, but not from the walls. Not really. I could still smell it in the air, sweet and cloying, clinging to the wallpaper like a reminder. Lily rested her head in my lap while I wiped the last of the sticky streaks off the lower cabinet door. My fingers moved in slow, tired circles. "It's like it never happened," she murmured. I paused. "Not really, just cleaned up." She was quiet for a while after that. I looked around the small kitchen, the yellowed linoleum, the chipped porcelain sink, the overhead light that buzzed sometimes when it was cold. The fridge still had magnets with my high school photos on them, but the warmth that used to live here had long since evaporated. We were ghosts in a house that didn't want us. "Mommy," Lily asked after a few minutes, "why does Grandpa hate me?" My hand froze mid-wipe. I looked down at her. Her face was turned away, eyes tracing the baseboard. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was asking for the truth. He doesn't hate you, I said carefully. He doesn't know how to be kind sometimes. Lily nodded slowly. But why doesn't he yell at Grandma when she breaks stuff? Because she never has to apologize, because she's the judge and jury here, because the rules are different when you're not the one they're disappointed in. I didn't say any of that. I just smoothed her hair and kissed the top of her head. You didn't do anything wrong. You're a good kid, Lily, a really good kid. Her little fingers curled into the blanket. Maybe if I'm better, they'll like us more, she said in a whisper. No, I said firmly, setting down the rag. No, honey, that's not how this works. You don't have to earn their love. That's not your job. She nodded again, but I could tell she didn't quite believe me. Not yet. I wanted to scream. To punch a wall. To run upstairs and shake my parents awake and make them look at the bruises they were leaving on this girl's spirit, even if they weren't physical. But I didn't. I just held her tighter. After a while, Lily fell asleep curled up beside the refrigerator. I scooped her up in my arms, still light as a feather, and carried her back to our tiny room. The twin mattress on the floor was barely big enough for both of us, but we'd learned to fit. I tucked her in, brushed her cheek again, and slipped under the blanket beside her. The shadows danced on the ceiling, shapes flickering from the street lamp outside. I stared at them for a long time, heart heavy. We'd scrubbed the jam from the cabinets. But the crack it left in our world that wasn't going anywhere. And deep down, I knew something had shifted in Lily tonight. Something permanent. That terrified me more than anything. I needed to get us out of here. But I didn't even know where to begin. The October rain hadn't let up all day. By the time my shift at the diner ended, the hem of my uniform was soaked through, and my sneakers squished with every step. I didn't bother changing, I was too tired. My whole body ached from double shifts, and my hands still smelled faintly like fryer grease and lemon cleaner. It was nearly 5 when I turned onto our street. The houses all looked gray and slouched in the drizzle, their porches hollow with shadows. Ours was halfway down the block, worn red brick with paint peeling from the eaves. That's when I saw her. Lily, curled up on the top step, knees to her chest, drenched. She didn't see me at first. She was shivering, her thin jacket soaked clean through, her little pink backpack slumped beside her. I dropped my purse and ran. Lily, her head jerked up, her eyes were wide, red-rimmed. "Mommy," she cried, stumbling toward me, her whole body trembling. I tried the key, it didn't work. I knocked and knocked. I pulled her into my arms, wrapping my soaking cardigan around her, though it didn't offer much warmth. "What do you mean it didn't work?" My voice cracked as I looked up at the door. The key was still in her hand. The same one we'd both been using for months. I climbed the steps, fumbled the key into the lock, and it stuck. Deadbolt changed. My pulse jumped. The door creaked open from the inside before I could knock. There stood my mother, her arms folded across her chest like stone columns. Her lips pursed in a tight line, eyes scanning me, then Lily, then the wet sidewalk behind us as if someone might see. "You don't live here anymore," she said. I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me," I said, she repeated, her voice like ice on glass. "You don't live here anymore. Take your things and go." Rainwater dripped from my chin as I stood frozen on the porch, Lily pressed into my side. "You're kicking us out," I whispered. She didn't answer. Just turned and disappeared inside, letting the door fall shut behind her with a final, hollow thud. The lock clicked a second later. The silence that followed felt louder than the storm. I stood there for a moment, too stunned to move. The chill settled into my bones, my fingers numb. Lily's small hand clung to mine, and I could feel her shaking even harder now. It wasn't just cold, it was panic. "Mommy, what do we do?" I looked down at her. Her cheeks were pale, hair plastered to her forehead, her lip trembling so violently I thought she might throw up. I didn't have an answer. No car, no umbrella, no other key, no plan, but I couldn't let her see that. I crouched down, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. "We're going to be okay," I said, brushing wet hair from her face. "We'll go somewhere dry, warm, we just need a minute." "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. "No," I said, though I wasn't sure. "We're not in trouble. We're in transition, that's all." She didn't understand what that meant, but it made her nod. I picked up her backpack with one hand and my own bag with the other, then laced my fingers through hers. We stepped off the porch into the rain. I didn't cry, not yet. We walked to the corner gas station 4 blocks away, ducked inside past the blinking lottery signs, and huddled near the back by the coffee machine. I bought Lily a hot chocolate from the machine, then sat her down at the plastic counter by the window. Steam rose from the paper cup as she wrapped her hands around it. Her teeth still chattered. I pretended to check my phone like I had a dozen options. In reality, I had none. Every contact in my phone was either a diner coworker juggling their own mess or a name from a life I'd left behind years ago. Except one. Brielle Hadley. My roommate from college before I dropped out. We hadn't talked in 2 years. Not since the wedding I didn't show up for, but I still had her number. I stared at it. Lily leaned her head against my arm. Can we go home now? My heart cracked open. I pressed the call button. Please, I thought, please still remember me. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, warm, confused. Jessica, I swallowed. Hey, I know it's been forever. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't an emergency. The sound of Bry's voice cracked something loose inside me. I had braced myself for awkwardness, guilt, or the polite distance of a friendship faded by time, but instead she sounded almost relieved. Jess, of course you can come, she said, not even letting me finish. You and Lily, my couch is yours, my floor is yours, heck, the entire apartment is yours if you need it. I covered the phone with my hand and looked at Lily, whose head still rested against my shoulder. Her eyelids drooped, her hot chocolate long gone. We've got a place to go, I whispered. She gave a sleepy nod but didn't speak. Bry's voice came back, softer this time. Text me your location, I'll come pick you up. I hesitated. Are you sure? I hate to ask. You're not asking, she interrupted. You're letting me be there for you, that's what friends do. By the time her silver Corolla pulled up outside the gas station, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Bry barely parked before she was out of the car, racing through the puddles in sneakers, arms already open. She pulled me into a tight hug, then crouched in front of Lily. Hi, sweet pea, she said gently. I'm Bry. Your mom and I used to stay up way too late watching bad movies and eating cereal from the box. Lily gave her a shy nod. We've got cereal at home too, Bry added with a wink. The sugary kind. Lily cracked the tiniest smile. The drive to her apartment in Columbus took just over an hour. Lily fell asleep halfway there, her head resting in my lap, breath slow and steady. I stared out the window, still too stunned to speak. When we arrived, Bry led us up 3 flights of stairs to a cozy 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like lentil stew and lemon cleaner. The heat was on high, and a soft throw blanket was already laid out on the couch with a pillow. You don't owe me a thing, Bry said simply as I stepped through the door. And that was when I broke. All of it, the jam, the yelling, the locked door, Lily on the porch, it hit me like a tidal wave, and I sank onto the couch and sobbed. Not quiet tears, but the kind that come from someplace deep where grief gets tangled with relief. Bry sat beside me and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I should have called you sooner, I gasped between sobs. I thought I had to do everything alone. You don't, she said, holding on tighter. Not anymore. Lily stirred awake during the crying, but Bry handled it like she'd been part of our lives all along. She made Lily a cup of warm milk and showed her where the spare bedroom was. The walls were painted mint green, and a little bookshelf held a row of colorful kids' books from her niece's last visit. You can sleep in here if you want, Bry offered. Or bunk in with your mom. I like it, Lily said quietly. It smells like clean. That night, I curled up beside her on the twin bed, listening to her breathing even out. For the first time in months, she looked peaceful. Safe. Bry had left a small nightlight plugged into the wall. A golden glow filled the corners of the room, and the silence wasn't hostile, it was soft. I didn't sleep much. My body ached in strange ways, like it didn't quite know how to relax. But my mind kept returning to the moment Bry opened her car door in the rain and didn't ask for explanations, just opened her arms and made space. That moment rewrote something in me. I wasn't alone. I had lost a lot in the last few months, my job, my home, my parents' approval, but I hadn't lost everything. Some doors don't slam shut. Some open wide and wait. 3 weeks passed in a blur of soup pots, thermometer readings, and whispered prayers in the dark. Lily got sick not long after we moved in with Bry. At first, I told myself it was just a cold. Kids get them, especially after stress and a wet night on a porch. But when her low-grade fever lingered into its 6th day and the coughing kept her up through the night, I started to worry. Really worry. I sat cross-legged on the floor beside her bed, pressing cool compresses to her forehead while her small body curled under Bry's soft floral comforter. I'm okay, Mommy, she'd rasp, trying to smile, even as she reached for the trash bin to cough into. I didn't have the heart to tell her that it wasn't okay, that I couldn't take her to a doctor. I'd lost my job at the factory 6 weeks before the accident, and with it our health insurance. Every urgent care clinic I called wanted payment up front. I had $41 to my name and no credit card limit left to fake it with. Instead, I brewed herbal teas. I searched online forums for home remedies. I called pharmacies to ask about over-the-counter options and scribbled notes like I was cramming for a test I couldn't afford to fail. Bri noticed, of course. She wasn't nosy, but she was kind. She let me take over the kitchen without complaint, even when I filled her spice rack with ginger root and elderberry syrup. She never said anything when I stayed up all night sitting at Lily's bedside. One night after Lily finally drifted into a restless sleep, I sat down across from Bri at the tiny dining table. Dinner was done, mac and cheese and steamed broccoli, and Lily had barely eaten a few bites. I stared at the cold food on my plate untouched. "I'm sorry we're still here," I said quietly. Bri looked up, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Jess, don't do that." "Do what?" "Apologize for needing help. That's what people do, you know, help each other." I opened my mouth to argue, but she held up a hand. "Let me guess, you're about to say you're a burden, that I didn't sign up for this, that I've done too much already." I closed my mouth. She smiled gently. "You've always been the girl who holds the world up with one hand and ties her hair back with the other, but even Atlas needed a break." I wanted to believe her, but I still felt that familiar guilt curl in my gut. "This wasn't supposed to last this long," I whispered, my throat tight. "I told you it'd be a few days, a week at most. And now Lily's sick and I can't even get her a proper doctor." Bri stood and crossed the room. She returned with a fresh cup of tea and set it in front of me. "She's warm and safe. And she has a mom who hasn't stopped fighting for her since the moment I answered your call. That counts." My eyes welled with tears, but I didn't let them fall. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness," I said, barely audible. "You're not." I hate that I can't fix this." Bri sighed, then pulled out the chair beside me and sat. "You're not broken, Jess. You're in a season, and seasons change." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the dishwasher and the occasional cough from Lily's room. Later that night, after I'd read Lily another chapter from an old library book, I kissed her forehead and crept into the hallway. I passed Bri's room. Her light was still on. From behind the door, I heard the quiet rustle of pages and a voice, hers on the phone. "Yeah, she's doing everything she can, but I think she's scared to ask for more help." No, I didn't say anything. I don't want to embarrass her. I moved away before I could hear more. I didn't know who she was talking to, and I didn't want pity. But in that moment, I knew with certainty that Bri wasn't just offering a roof. She was offering dignity, a soft place to land. And somehow, despite everything, it made the fear a little quieter. Just for tonight. The alarm went off at 4:45 every morning. I barely heard it anymore. My body woke up before the sound, already bracing for the ache in my knees, the tightness in my back, the quiet rush to slip out the door without waking Lily. I'd kiss her cheek in the dim light of Bri's hallway and whisper the same promise into her hair. "Be good for Bri. I'll be back before you know it." But it was never really before she knew it. Most nights, she was already asleep when I returned, limbs tangled in blankets, the corner of a book still clutched in her hand. I'd crawl in beside her, whispering silly bedtime stories even if she couldn't hear them. She'd stir sometimes, enough to mumble, "Love you, Mommy," before drifting back off. Those words were enough to keep me going. I'd landed 2 jobs, morning shifts at a downtown bakery and evenings bussing tables at a small Italian place near the university. The hours were brutal, but the checks, when added together, were just enough to keep us from drowning. Still, exhaustion made its home in my bones. I started measuring time not by hours, but in how many buses I could catch, how many blisters I'd earned that day, or how many cups of weak coffee it took to keep my eyes open until closing. Bri never complained. She left out clean towels, kept dinner warm when I couldn't make it back in time, and helped Lily with homework like it was second nature. One night, I came home a little earlier than usual, just past 8. The bus had miraculously been on time, and I'd skipped my last break to leave early. I slipped off my shoes in the hallway and heard laughter drifting from the living room. Lily's laughter. Not the tired chuckle she gave me to make me feel better, but real, bubbling laughter. I peeked around the corner and saw them, Bri and Lily sitting cross-legged on the rug, working on a puzzle. Lily's hair was up in a messy ponytail and her face was glowing. Okay, Bri was saying dramatically. If we get this piece wrong, the whole universe explodes. Lily giggled. It's the sky, not a bomb. Still, high stakes. I stepped into the room and both of them looked up. Lily jumped to her feet. Mommy, we saved you the last piece. She ran to me, dragging me toward the puzzle. Come finish it with us. My heart swelled and cracked all at once. I knelt, placing the final piece, a bright pink star, into the open space. It clicked perfectly. Bryce smiled. We've been working on this all week. I nodded, brushing a lock of Lily's hair back from her face. You're like her second mom, I said, my voice catching slightly. Bri didn't flinch. She just reached across the puzzle and squeezed my hand. She's easy to love. I didn't say anything more. I couldn't trust my voice. That night, after Lily fell asleep curled against me, I stared at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about how much I was missing. Every puzzle piece, every story, every inside joke that didn't include me. I told myself it was temporary, just a season. But a tiny, guilty part of me wondered if I was giving Lily what she really needed, or just barely keeping the lights on. 2 months in, I had memorized every crack in the sidewalk between the bus stop and Bri's apartment. I knew which street lamp flickered twice before going dark, and which steps creaked loudest on the third-floor landing. I knew how to shift my weight to open the apartment door quietly so I wouldn't wake Lily, but none of that made the weight in my chest any lighter. I dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my shoes, and checked the mail Bri had stacked neatly on the counter. In between a grocery flyer and an energy bill was a yellow envelope addressed to me from the county clinic. I already knew what it said. Final notice, application denied, too many applicants, not enough funding, try again next cycle. I set it aside without opening it. No use reading what I could already feel. Dinner was still warm on the stove, something Bri had thrown together, quinoa and roasted vegetables with lemon. I scooped a little onto a plate, but my stomach rebelled after the first few bites. Lily's laughter floated in from the other room. I walked toward the sound and leaned in the doorway. Bri sat on the couch, a throw blanket draped over her lap. Lily was beside her, a flashlight in hand, casting shadows on the ceiling like they were making shapes in the stars. And this one's a bunny wearing sunglasses, Lily giggled, waving the light in slow circles. Bri gasped dramatically. No way, that's clearly a llama doing the cha-cha. They both cracked up. I smiled weakly. Bri caught my eye and tilted her head. You okay? I nodded, lying as effortlessly as breathing. Just tired. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep with her stuffed bear tucked under one arm, I found Bri in the kitchen, rinsing mugs. I got a second notice on my overdue loan, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She paused, set the mug down. I applied for another part-time shift at the bakery, they're cutting hours. She turned to face me, drying her hands on a towel. Jess. I'm trying, Bri, I really am. I get up before the sun. I come home after dark. I've eaten noodles for lunch 20 days straight, and it's still not enough. My voice cracked. Rent, food, Lily's clothes, she's growing so fast I can't keep up. You don't have to prove anything to me, she said softly. I leaned back against the counter and closed my eyes. I feel like I'm running in circles, like there's no end to this. Bri stepped closer. Look at me. I did. You are doing the best you can, and more. It's not enough. It is. Maybe not by the world's standards, but by mine and Lily's, it's more than enough. I shook my head. I can't stay here forever. I told you it would be temporary. And it still can be, but you're not on a timer. This isn't some ticking clock counting down to your failure. I looked down at my hands. They were red and rough from endless washing, calloused in places I didn't even know could toughen. I just wanted to give her something steady, I whispered. After everything. After being pushed out of my own parents' house, I wanted to be someone she could rely on. Someone who doesn't flinch every time the rent's due. You already are, Bri said. You're the one who makes sure she has bedtime stories, even if you're barely awake. You're the one who taught her to be kind in a world that wasn't kind to you. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I don't know how to accept this kind of help without feeling like I've failed. Bri stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. You didn't fail, you were failed, there's a difference. I held onto her, too tired to argue. After a moment, she whispered into my hair, you can stay as long as you need, this is home too. And something about those last 3 words wrapped around my heart like a warm coat I didn't know I needed. Maybe I wasn't running in circles. Maybe I was slowly building something, even if it didn't look like the plan I once had. It started with a broken espresso machine and ended with me running through sleet in shoes with split soles. The Italian restaurant had been short-staffed all night again. The dinner rush stretched past closing, and by the time I wiped down the last table and clocked out, it was well past 11. I sprinted 2 blocks in the rain, breath puffing out in clouds, only to watch the last bus home disappear around the corner. Gone. The icy bench at the station was slick with rainwater. I sat down anyway, soaked to the skin, hugging my bag to my chest. I stared up at the digital sign blinking red. Next arrival, 6:25 a.m. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. I had no money for an Uber. Bri was already asleep. I knew because I'd texted her at the start of my shift to say I'd be late, and her reply had come hours ago, followed by nothing. I didn't want to wake her or scare her into thinking something was wrong. So I waited. People passed by under umbrellas or huddled in their cars. No one noticed me. I was invisible, cold, alone. I pulled my knees up and buried my face between them. That's when I heard the car. A slow, cautious approach. Then brakes, a pause, a soft engine idle. I looked up as the passenger window rolled down. A man leaned toward the opening, mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing a coat that looked dry and expensive. The car was a black SUV, newer model, leather interior. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but not overly familiar. "I'm not a creep, I promise. You okay?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm fine." "Sure you are," he said gently, eyes scanning my soaked clothes, the visible shiver in my spine. "But you look like you're freezing to death on a bench at midnight." I hesitated, he saw it. "Look, I'm heading across town. I'm not trying to pick you up, I swear. I just hate seeing someone cry in the rain." I hadn't realized I was crying until he said it. He reached over and popped the passenger door open. No pressure, just offering a warm seat and a ride. Everything in me screamed caution. But I thought about Lily, about walking in soaked, sick again, about Bri waking up and seeing my empty bed. I looked him over, his hands were on the wheel, not his phone. He wasn't leering. There was no sleazy smirk, no come on babe tone, just calm. "Still," I asked, "do you have ID?" He smiled and pulled out his wallet immediately, passing it through the gap in the window. "David Sinclair, Property Law." I stared at the ID for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," I said quietly, "but I'm texting your license plate to someone." "Good," he said, not even flinching. "That's smart." I climbed in. Warmth hit me like a wave, heated seats. The gentle thrum of the engine. My soaked clothes steamed instantly, my hands starting to sting from the sudden temperature shift. "Cup holders got tissues," he said, pointing. I took one, wiped my face, and tried to settle into the seat without looking like a stray. "Where to?" he asked. I gave Bryce Street, keeping my voice guarded. "You okay now?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. I looked out the window, then back at him. And for reasons I can't explain, not even now, I told him everything. Not every little detail, but the core of it: my daughter, my parents. Getting kicked out. Working 2 jobs. Trying, failing, and trying again. The panic, the guilt, the never-enoughness of it all. He didn't interrupt once. He just listened, driving through the wet streets like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. When we reached Bry's block, he put the car in park and turned to me. "You've been through hell," he said. "But that house you got kicked out of, do you know whose name is actually on the deed?" I frowned. "It was my grandmother's, but she left it to my parents when she passed." "You ever see the will?" "No." "Why?" He smiled just a little. "I deal in property law. If you ever want to check, I might be able to help." I stared at him. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," he said, handing me his card. "Text me tomorrow, we'll look it up." I didn't text David the next morning. I waited. I told myself I was too tired, too busy, too uncertain. But the truth was, I didn't know how to believe in good things anymore. A man offers you a warm car, listens without judgment, and hands you hope like a lifeline in the dark. It had to come with strings. Nothing ever came free, not in my world. But then Lily coughed through the night again, and Bri casually mentioned how much rent had gone up in Columbus over the last year, not in a pressuring way, just in that subtle tone that said, "I know you're trying." That's when I picked up the card David had given me. It was still in the pocket of my jacket, slightly bent from the rain. "David Sinclair, Sinclair and Rothwell LLP. Property law, probate, inheritance." I stared at it for a long time before finally sending the text. "Hi, it's Jessica, from the bus bench. Not sure if you meant it, but I'd like to ask about my grandmother's house." His reply came less than 2 minutes later. "Absolutely meant it. Want to come by my office this week? or I can swing by wherever's convenient. 2 days later, I sat across from him in a sleek little office with ivy on the windowsills and a painting of Lake Erie on the wall. David wore a navy sweater over a collared shirt and offered me tea, which I politely declined twice before accepting just to have something to hold. I told him everything I remembered about Grandma Nora, how she raised me for a few years when my parents needed space, how she passed away when Lily was just a baby, and how the house had somehow ended up with my parents. David listened the same way he had in the car. No interruptions, just nods, the occasional scribble in a notebook. "Do you know if there was a will?" he finally asked. I shook my head. "They said she didn't leave one. But she told me before she got sick that she wanted the house to stay with me." David leaned back slightly, thinking, "Sometimes wills get lost, especially when family members don't want to follow them." My heart jumped. "You think? I think we should look at the property records first," he said, standing and walking over to a filing cabinet. "Sometimes, people make informal promises but never get around to signing papers. Other times, there are old quirks in the deed that give us a window." He pulled up something on his computer, typing quickly. "Here we go," he muttered. "Original owner Nora Holloway transferred to Huh." His brow furrowed. "What?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "There's no formal transfer recorded. The deed was never legally updated. Your parents filed for taxes on the property, but ownership was never reassigned from Nora Holloway." My mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" David turned the screen toward me. "It means the house is still in your grandmother's name. And if she didn't leave a will, the law follows the line of succession, meaning her closest next of kin." He clicked a few more times, opening a scanned birth record. "You," he said simply. I blinked. "Me. You're her only direct heir. No surviving siblings. No other children. If your parents never completed a transfer and there's no valid will naming them as beneficiaries." He looked up at me, smiling gently. "Jessica, that house might legally belong to you." The room spun. "I thought I lost everything," I whispered. David's voice was calm, steady. "You might have only lost the keys, not the claim." I gripped the edge of the chair. "So, what happens now?" He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Now, we go digging. I'll pull every file from the probate court and verify the chain of title. If everything lines up like I think it might, we file a claim. And if it works, then you go home," he said, "on your terms." The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold marble. I hadn't been inside a building this intimidating since my divorce hearing, and even then I hadn't walked in holding something so heavy, so personal. A folder. Inside it, the deed to my grandmother's house. Or rather, the deed that had never been properly transferred. The paperwork proving, in plain language, that what my parents had claimed as theirs was never legally theirs at all. David walked beside me, calm as ever, wearing a charcoal coat and holding the official filing documents under one arm. He was focused, confident. I was barely breathing. "You okay?" he asked as we stepped through the metal detectors. "No," I admitted. "I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff." "You're not jumping," he said gently. "You're reclaiming." That word sat with me as we climbed the wide staircase, reclaiming. Like I was digging up something that had always been mine but had been buried under years of guilt and obedience. We filed the lawsuit that morning, petition for probate correction and reinstatement of ownership rights. My name, my grandmother's name, a stack of documents, and David's signature anchoring it all. By noon, a court clerk handed David an official stamped copy of the notice. I held it like it might break in my hands. "This'll be served to them within the next 48 hours, David said. "They'll have a chance to respond, but with this record," he patted the file, "they're not going to win." I nodded slowly, then asked, "Do you think they'll be angry?" David's expression didn't change. "Of course, but that's not your problem." We walked out into the cold afternoon sun, my head spinning. Later that evening, I got the text. "Notice of service completed, Holloway residence." I knew what that meant. They had it. The official order, the proof. I don't know what I expected, that they'd call or rage or deny it entirely, but instead it was silence, until 2 days later. I was sitting at the small table in Bry's kitchen helping Lily glue together a science project volcano when my phone buzzed. Blocked caller ID. I hesitated, then answered. "Jessica," my mother's voice crackled through the line, sharp as ever. "What is this?" I stood up slowly, stepping away from Lily. "It's exactly what it looks like. This is some kind of joke, right? Some scam." No, I said, my voice firmer now. It's real, the house was never yours. Legally, it still belongs to Grandma Nora, and as her only heir, you ungrateful little, I didn't let her finish. I'm not doing this over the phone, I just wanted you to hear it from me before the court hearing next week. There was a pause, then a low, seething, you think you can just take it back? No, I said. I already did. And I hung up. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down. Lily looked up from the table. Mommy, are you okay? I nodded slowly, returning to her side and helping her steady the volcano base. I think, I whispered, we're going to be okay. But my heart was pounding, because now it was real. No more papers. No more maybes. I was going to stand in the very home I'd been pushed out of and take back what never should have been stolen. The walk up the front steps felt longer than I remembered. It was early afternoon, the January air sharp enough to sting. My fingers clutched the manila envelope so tightly it bent at the edges. Inside was the certified letter of transfer, the final document. Signed, sealed, unshakable. Bry had offered to come with me, David too, but I said no. I needed to do this alone. For years, this house had been my purgatory. A place where I was always almost good enough, always nearly welcome, always one breath away from being told I was too much or not enough. But now, I wasn't here to ask. I rang the doorbell, for a long moment nothing. Then I heard the locks turning. The door creaked open just a few inches. My father stood there in his worn flannel shirt, eyes narrowing when he saw me. He looked older than I remembered, tired but hard. What do you want? He asked flatly. I held up the envelope. To give you this. He opened the door wider, suspicious. What is it? Court-certified letter of ownership transfer, I said calmly. The house is mine now, legally, permanently. His face darkened. You've got some nerve. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. My boots landed on the same entry rug I'd wiped Lily's tears on. I scanned the living room, the same couch, the same old recliner where my mother used to knit and judge the world through the blinds. Everything was exactly as I left it. Except I wasn't the same. My mother appeared in the hallway, arms crossed like a shield. Her mouth opened in protest, but I held up the envelope. This isn't a discussion, I said, my voice steady. This is final. You ungrateful brat, my father barked, snatching the envelope and ripping it open. His eyes darted over the text. You think this means anything after all we did for you? I didn't flinch. You kicked me and Lily out, in the rain, without warning. After everything I've endured in this house, you thought I'd stay quiet. My mother's voice rose to a screech. We were trying to teach you responsibility. No, I said, taking a step forward. You were trying to control me, punish me, and you hurt Lily in the process. My father's face twisted. You think you can just take this house out from under us? Where are we supposed to go? I looked him dead in the eye. That wasn't a concern when you turned the lock behind my daughter. He lunged toward me. Not physically, but with words, the kind meant to stab. You think you're some kind of hero now. This doesn't make you better than us. No, I said, planting my feet. It just makes me free. There was a beat of silence. My mother looked at my father, then back at the envelope in his hand. She read the seal, saw David's firm's name, and understood. This was real. There would be no undoing it. No manipulation. No threats that could scare me anymore. I'll give you 2 weeks to pack, I said, turning toward the door. I want the house empty. If you need legal assistance moving your things, I'm happy to involve the sheriff's department. You wouldn't dare, my mother hissed. I looked back over my shoulder, a fire in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Try me. And with that, I walked out. The cold air hit my face like a baptism. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, the house behind me wasn't something I feared, it was something I had reclaimed. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the winter light softening the edges, or maybe it was just the absence of tension in the air. The front door hung open now, the last of my parents' boxes already hauled away by a moving service David recommended. They never called, never showed for a goodbye. Fine by me. They left behind dust, the smell of old furniture, and a few forgotten coat hangers. But the space itself, that was mine now, ours. Lily, I called from the front porch, do you want to open the door for the first time? She looked up from her booster seat in Bry's car, her cheeks still pink from excitement. She jumped out, her sneakers crunching across the icy path. Do I use a key? She asked breathlessly. I held it out, gold and gleaming in the afternoon sun. You sure do. Her fingers trembled as she turned it in the lock. Click. She shoved the door open, then looked back at me with wide eyes. It's all ours now, she whispered like it was a secret too precious to speak aloud. Bri parked across the street, the back of her SUV stuffed with blankets, donated furniture, and the lasagna she insisted we needed to make it a real homecoming. She crossed the lawn carrying a potted plant tucked in her elbow. Fig tree, she announced. Low maintenance, like me. I laughed, really laughed, and took it from her. Inside, the house echoed with every step. It was still empty, still scarred with the signs of years lived under someone else's bitterness. But the silence was different now. Not heavy, not cruel, just waiting. We started in the kitchen. Bri opened the windows even though the air was cold. Gotta let the ghosts out, she said, waving a dish towel around like she was smudging the place with fresh air. I stood near the counter, hand resting on the cabinet where Lily had once dropped that jam jar. The scratch was still faintly visible. Lily traced it with her finger. This is where it started, huh? I nodded. Yeah, but it's not where it ends. She leaned into me, and I kissed the top of her head. By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops, the living room had a mismatched couch, a rug from Bri's storage unit, and a lamp that didn't quite work unless you hit it twice. The heater rattled to life like it hadn't been used in years, but it worked. That night, we ate lasagna cross-legged on the living room floor. Bri brought over folding chairs and her favorite mugs. Lily made name tags for every room with marker and tape. Jessica and Lily's kitchen. Jessica and Lily's bathroom. Jessica and Lily's adventure closet. I think she's happy, I whispered later, after Lily finally fell asleep on a mattress laid out in her new room. Bri poured us both tea and settled onto the couch beside me. She's not the only one. I stared at the hallway. I didn't know how much I missed breathing until I could do it again without guilt. Bri leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm going to miss hearing her feet run across my floor every morning. You'll still hear it, I smiled. Just over the phone, or when you visit. She swiped at her eyes. I will visit, often with snacks. I looked around the room, bare walls and secondhand everything, and still it felt like warmth. Not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. A home made not from memories we were forced to endure, but from moments we chose. David stopped by just after 8, a folder in hand. He reviewed the final ownership papers with me again, making sure I had copies, explaining how to apply for utilities in my name, what to expect come tax season. I still don't know what I would have done without you, I said, after signing the last form. He gave a soft smile. You would have figured it out, you've been doing the impossible for months. As he left, Lily ran to the door in her pajamas and waved dramatically. Thank you, Mr. Lawyer Man, he laughed. Take care of your mom, okay? I always do. And I believed her. Spring came slowly that year, as if the world itself needed time to thaw. But when it did, the change was undeniable. The house bloomed with life. Lily's watercolor art covered the refrigerator, taped up at odd angles. The living room walls were a fresh, soft blue. A second-hand coffee table sat proudly in the center of a warm rug we'd picked out together. Even the mailbox out front had a new label, printed in bold letters, Jessica and Lily. I stood on the porch one Saturday morning, sipping coffee as the breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Lily was in the yard with a jump rope, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes. This place wasn't just shelter anymore. It was home. Inside, Bri flipped pancakes while humming off-key, crashing her weekend visit with her usual chaotic grace. So, she said, flipping one dramatically, now that you're a homeowner, I expect brunch invitations regularly. I laughed. You invited yourself, remember? Exactly, she grinned. Now I'm coming to your place. I looked around at everything we'd built, slowly, stubbornly, piece by piece, and felt something settle in my chest. Not pride exactly, not relief, peace, the kind that comes only when you've earned it the hard way. I'd spent so long begging for space in other people's homes, hearts, and lives, but this I'd reclaimed, not through revenge, through resilience. And now, watching Lily twirl in the sun, I knew dignity isn't something someone hands you. It's something you build, brick by brick. With people who see you. And stay. That was the end of the story. As I look back on everything, I still think about Bri opening her door without hesitation and David deciding to dig into my grandmother's deed when he could have just driven away. If you were in their place, would you have done the same? Or have you ever stepped in like that for someone when it wasn't your responsibility? Tell me in the comments if they did the right thing. And if this story meant something to you, Please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey I share.